tell you, I have a whole lecture that I give on that subject that would take quite some time. I'll try to summarize in just a couple of minutes here. But the Internal Revenue Code 501c3, which applies to churches and other charitable institutions, provides that as a condition for having that tax-exempt status, that you cannot be involved in influencing elections, and that's a total prohibition. But you also can't have a substantial portion of your activity directed toward influencing legislation. Now again, that's not an absolute, that's just a substantial portion. Now as far as the first part, influencing elections, it says that the church can't. It doesn't say an individual in the church can't, it doesn't say the pastor can't. If Pastor Schroeder, for example, wants to write a letter to the editor saying, I, Mr. Schroeder, urge everybody to support Elizabeth Warren for president, then he's free to do that. And if he wants to say, I, Pastor Schroeder of a Lutheran church, believe that you should support this candidate, he's free to do that. What he can't do is say, on behalf of this church endorses this candidate. When he does that, he stepped over the line. He as an individual can, and he can use his position to do so, but he can't do so on behalf of the church itself. Now, a question is sometimes raised, what about endorsement from the pulpit? Well, I was told about an incident of a black pastor in Georgia who said to his congregation he wanted to endorse Jesse Jackson, but he said, I'm not allowed to do so from the pulpit here, that would violate the IRS rules. So he stepped down from the pulpit and said, I endorse Jesse Jackson. Well, I've heard about this at a tax conference and everybody laughed about that, but actually I think that pastor is pretty sharp. But by doing that, he made a distinction between his personal opinion versus officially on behalf of the church. I think he made his point very well, and I think the IRS, or if not the IRS, at least the courts, would say that he was entitled to do that. Now, I can talk a little more about influencing legislation. Again, you can do that so long as it's not a substantial portion of your activity. And usually we say that if it's less than 10% of your total budget or your total man hours, you're probably all right on that. But you know how the IRS defines substantial? As more than insubstantial. And maybe that's not as stupid as it sounds, because maybe they deliberately want to leave it that way so they can decide it on a case-by-case basis. I haven't even asked how they define insubstantial, because I think I know what the answer would be. But at any rate, some of you are familiar with the Alliance Defending Freedom. Very good group. And they have one day, I think they used to say in September, now they're saying whenever you want to do it, that they would call Pulpit Freedom Sunday, in which they would encourage you as a pastor to preach a sermon that would endorse a candidate in a way that would violate the regulation of the IRS. And they say, if you do this, and if the IRS challenges you and tries to revoke your tax-exempt status, we will represent you without charge. Well, first year, some 70 pastors submitted sermons like this, and each year the number has been increasing. You know how many of them the IRS has contacted? 0. Oh, one other condition, they said not only do you have to preach that sermon, you have to send a copy of it to the IRS so they know you're doing it. Part of the idea is that ADF would like to raise a First Amendment challenge to this regulation. And anyway, maybe they'll get their chance eventually, but seems like the IRS doesn't really want to touch this one. But anyway, I do think it is an abridgment of the First Amendment, and hopefully that will either be repealed or struck down by the courts.